Alright, so here we are. We're going to do in this video a combination of Lesson 4 and Lesson 5. So we're going to start off with Lesson 4, which is page 5 in your note packet. And Lesson 4 is about the opposite of a number. So in this box here it says walk the number line. And it says each integer has an opposite denoted by negative a. And then it says that negative a and a are opposites if they are on opposite sides of 0 and the same direction, or the same distance, from 0 on the number line. So put a box around where it says same distance because that's the important part. Alright, we kind of talked about those earlier. So example 1 says locate the number 8 and its opposite on the number line. So we know that 8 is down here. I'm going to put a circle and I'm going to call it point A. And then the opposite of 8 would be negative 8 all the way down here. I'm going to call it B. And then it says explain how they're related to 0. So we know that 8 and negative 8, they have the same distance from 0, right? If you count, A would be 8 spots to the right, B would be 8 spots to the left. So we can say that they have the same distance from 0. Okay? Now if we look at the next example, it says plot the opposites of the numbers on the number line. So the opposite of 9, we're going to fill this out first, would be negative 9. The opposite of negative 2 would be positive 2. The opposite of 4 would be negative 4. And the opposite of negative 7 would be just positive 7. Alright, so I'm going to call these points A, B, C, and D. So, point A is at 9, so here's A. Point B is at 2, point A is at negative 9, like that. Try that again. Point A is at negative 9, so down here, this is A. B is at positive 2, so down here. C is at negative 4. And D is at 7. Oh, this is supposed to be a D. There we go. Alright, so that's all they asked you to do there. So go ahead and flip over to the next page. We're going to go through example 2. It says, write the integer that represents the opposite of each situation and explain what 0 means. So, part A says 100 feet above sea level. So the integer that would represent that would be just positive 100. So here 0 would represent, if we're talking about sea level, that would represent at sea level. So kind of right in the middle. The opposite though, and I want you to write this in, the opposite of 100 feet above sea level would be 100 feet below sea level. Alright. Part B says 32 degrees below 0, so that integer would be a negative 32. And 0 in this situation represents 0 degrees. And then if we were to do the opposite, which I want you to write down underneath here, the opposite would be 32 degrees above 0. Right? And then part C here says a withdrawal of $25. So remember, if you withdraw money from your bank account, you're taking it away. So the integer would be negative 25. And here 0 would represent no balance in your account, which basically means no money. Right? And the opposite of a withdrawal of $25 would be a deposit of $25. So that's going back to those terms that we talked about yesterday for positives and negatives. Right, we're going to skip example 2 for now. We're going to do one example on this page. It says on the number line, locate and label a credit of $15 and a debit for the same amount from a bank account. What does 0 represent? So if we're talking about 15s here, let's see, we could probably count by 5, so I'm going to put 0 right in the middle. This would be $5, $10, $15. Then going the other direction, this would be negative $5, negative $10, and negative $15. So I'm going to label the credit first. So if you credit $15 to your account, that would be positive 15. So this would be credit down on this end. And then a debit would be a minus 15. So it's the same thing like when your parents use their debit card, they're spending money. And then a 0 in this situation would again mean no balance or money in the account. Alright, before we flip over to lesson 5, I want you to try number 2 and number 3 on your own. Alright, so pause the video and then we will go over them in class tomorrow, but I want you to pause and try number 2 and 3 on your own first. Alright, so now that you've done that, we're going to go on to lesson 5. We're going to skip the first page, and we're just going to look at one thing on the second page here at the top on page 9, where it says the opposite of an opposite number. So example 1 says, what is the opposite of 8? How can we illustrate this on a number line? So we're going to go one step at a time here. It says, what number is 8 units to the right of 0? And we know that number is 8. Part B says, how can you illustrate locating the opposite of 8 on this number line? And it says, what is the opposite of 8? So we know the opposite of 8 is negative 8. Right? And then part C asks, what is the opposite of negative 8? We know that would just be 8. Okay? So, if we look at part D, it says the opposite of an opposite of a number is simply just the number you started with. Alright, so an example, if I asked you to find the opposite of 5, it would just be 5. Okay? So that's the only part from this lesson that I want to do right now. We'll do a few more examples and some more practice in class together. So if you have any questions, just bring those to class tomorrow.